What's your key message for other young engineers out there that might be a few years behind you?
You will have so much fun outside of the pressure on site. You'll oftentimes be told the work is hard, and it is hard, and there is a lot of pressure. There's a massive learning curve. However, you'll realize you will come out of your role with so many stories, with so many interesting experiences, and something so tangible. Find pleasure and enjoyment in what you're doing because it's one of the few industries where you can see your results.
I always like to ask people how's their day. How was your day?
Mm, It's funny you asked that. So it was a pretty good day. I'm based along the offshore sites as you know, I work for WEM as a site engineer, so I'm based along the offshore sites. And a lot of today, we did have a wet day due to the rains on Saturday, and it's really soaked up a lot of the pads we've got down in along 13th Avenue. So as part of a wet day, a lot of it is assessing the site, saying what can we do, what can't we do. If there are any pools of water, we try to dewater them by either a pump or letting the water go by having one of the operators get into a digger and digging out a trench. And so a big part of that, it's also a fantastic opportunity because it allows the supervisor and myself to strategize for the coming week and for the coming activities. And on that note of strategy, we managed to get a program going for our cast in situ pits. Hopefully that should take us to the end of the week, towards the end of the year, really close that out as part of it. So overall, I'd say it's a fantastic day. Big push, got a lot done, which is always a great thing to do.
Yeah, I always used to, when I was on a construction site, first up, if it does rain and you have, heavy storms, just
Mm,
to review all of your environmental controls, see how the site held up. You can sort of see where the water's flowing and what's happening. Give you some like tips and ideas and tricks for next time, but
mm.
also an opportunity to, catch up, which is always nice, particularly on the emails. There's a lot of emails. I find like there's a lot more emails now. Everyone just emails, emails, emails.
A
Um,
lot of emails, a lot of calls.
yeah, yeah. Do you find that? Like, I mean, I know you're sort of a young engineer. Do you find
Mm.
that there is a lot of email, or is it you're more because you're on site, you feel like you can have more conversations over the phone?
I realized when I was previously in a design role, everything was done by email. We needed that correspondence all the time. However, now a lot of it is done by the phone, particularly because if we have a subby or we have someone that requires material on site, it's so much quicker to get it done by the phone. Lock it in, sort out any kinks with the details, and if we have time following that, we can confirm it via an email. So it
Yeah.
definitely leans more towards conversations over the phone and
Mm.
then emails later on.
Yeah, I mean, how important do you think it is to be able to pick up the phone and have conversations as a young engineer?
I've found it to be absolutely critical because oftentimes with emails, one thing I've realized by speaking to a lot of people is they'll give it a quick glance through. They'll look for almost like the cliff notes for it. And as a result, important context is oftentimes left out. So with a conversation, you're able to understand, what do I need to do? Who needs it? Why do they need it? When do they need it? So you're just able to get so much more across. And it also allows you to build that relationship with either the supplier, the subby, the staff on site. So I have found it to be pretty critical overall.
Yeah, it really is. Yeah, it's a funny talk. I sort of, talk to a lot of young engineers, and it's always about like pick up the
Mm.
phone, have a conversation. Yeah, email is just so one-sided, and you can get lost in the ether of an inbox. Building relationships like super important. How have you built relationships, as a young engineer?
Oh, it's my charming smile and No, a lot of it really is just bringing forward that initial banter in a conversation. When I'm speaking with a new supplier, it's getting to know them, it's understanding. If I'm calling the button on Monday, asking you, how did your weekend go? Or just opening the line is, hey, how you going? It's Kartik from WEM Civil. How are you? Oftentimes I'll respond to be very, very small talk and will lead into the order. And what I've found is oftentimes, if you order enough from them, they'll instantly recognize you and just able to hit them up on the mobile. So how do I go about building that relationship? A lot of it is just by having a conversation with them. It really is a small talk that I've found takes it a lot further than an email would. Because likewise, in an email, a lot is lost. The tone could come off as something completely different to what you actually want it to be. So a lot of it comes down to small talk, continuing the conversation, and then repeated conversations with that person. I've realized, or I've found that really helps bring the relationship about.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, hard to smile over the phone, but I'm sure
I'll
it's
FaceTime
charming.
him.
I'm sure it's charming nonetheless. So tell me, what's your key message for other young engineers out there that might be a few years behind you, looking to be where you are in your career?
I've got to preface by saying I am incredibly inexperienced. I've just about cracked 2 years all up. So a lot of what I say, I cannot come from a place of authority or experience. However, the message I can share is that you will have so much fun outside of the pressure on site. You'll oftentimes be told the work is hard, and it is hard, and there is a lot of pressure. There's a massive learning curve. However, you'll realize you'll come out of your role with so many stories, with so many interesting experiences, and something so tangible that every day at the end of an activity, you'll come out proud knowing that you did something with a team that netted you a tangible result. So to keep it simple, a lot of it is that find pleasure and enjoyment in what you're doing because it's one of the few industries where you can see your results.
Uh, Tell me what is a tangible result for you? What does that
Hmm.
look like? What is that goal, that end goal?
Well, okay, a great example would be cast in situ pits. Oftentimes we do typically use precast pits.
Yep.
However, every now and then, due to the pipe configuration, we may need to have those bits cast on site. And what that involves is ensuring the reinforcement steel is in place, ensuring the floors, the walls, the roof, the chimney, everything is cast. Now, for that to actually happen, you need to speak with the subbies, you need to understand what do they need, when do they need it, why do they need it, and then you also need to organize any inspections that they may need. So all this work, I suppose you could say, is going on in the background, facilitates what the subbies can actually do. And that contribution that you make results in something where you look at it, you're like, okay, right. Although small, I did have a hand to play in that. And on a larger scale, a tangible result will be, it could be something as small as organizing the right plant and equipment to go to the job site, because that allows you to grade the lot, move the earth around, get into the shape you need it to be. For example, we have a new city being built near the airport. I believe it's called Bradfield. Now, my
Yep.
company, they are doing the civil works for that. Now, I know every engineer, every operator, every laborer, every subby, 15, 20 years from now, they'll drive past that and they'll look at it and be like, I did play a role in getting a new city built.
Yeah.
That in itself, it's the exact same thing people said 100, 200 years ago when Sydney was really being established. So you can walk away from it being proud, you work with the team. Through all the trials, all the tribulations, you see what your effort has resulted in.
Yeah, I mean, being an engineer who's often put pipes in the ground, or worked underground, every now and then you get an above ground structure that, now I've got kids and I can drive past and point to. or I can point to a subdivision or the houses or, the playgrounds or the lake or whatever it is. Being able to look at what those tangible assets, those outcomes are years later, it is most definitely fulfilling.
Mm.
I think though, there is a lot of people that think about construction, and you said, yeah, it's a grind, it's a lot of high pressure. How do you deal with that high pressure environment on a construction site?
How do I deal with it on site? I was given this advice where you may have hundreds of tasks to do. Find one, focus on one, get it done, move to the next. In the words of my old mentor, close the loop. And then you can take that further and find out of all these tasks I have, what drives the project forward the most? What is the most critical to do? Focus your attention on that. Now, because of how inexperienced I am, oftentimes it is my supervisors or my managers that will help me determine my priorities. So again, to keep it simple, comes down to determine your priorities, find the one thing, focus on the one thing, close it out, carry on to the next. That every little time you close something out and you know it's set, it's a little rush of dopamine right there, and you feel great because you've taken it to completion, or as far as you can. So that's how I manage the day-to-day stress on site.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, one step at a time, a little bit of time blocking, focus, prioritization. I like that you said that it is a lot of time others will tell you what your priorities are. And I do like your little hit of dopamine. It's almost like when you have a to-do list, you're crossing out that, yeah, I did that.
Exactly what it is.
What I like to do, and I have a big email that I've drafted that might have some markups, it might have links, it might have a summary and a body. It's taken hours to craft just one email. Hit that enter button, bang it. That's a moment. That's gone. That's someone else's problem now.
And just to add on to that, something else I found helps. And again, I received this advice from the owner of Western Earth Movers, Graham Raggs, and he said, "You will have bad days, however, you need to find something to laugh about." And having those moments of laughter where you're having a horrible day, and you will have horrible days. I've had horrible days, horrible weeks. But there are certain moments during those weeks and days where I have lost my shit laughing. And that adds so much levity to the work that you're doing. It makes it a little bit more, it makes it a lot more bearable, and it makes it worth it. And this can come from anywhere, speaking with the crew on site, whether it's during smoke or whether it's during lunch or during your pre-start in the morning. It could be having a fun conversation with your supervisor. Or in my case, it could be trying to get my ute out of freshly pad foot rolled lots while my supervisor's head is banging against the walls of my car. So there's definitely like fun moments where you can just have a laugh. It helps a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I think you got to find the joy in the little things. And I usually find most of the time, they're with people, making those connections with people. And yeah, I mean, you're right. Site can be tough. It's not for everyone. But yeah, I often say that if you get an opportunity to go work on a construction site, you should try and take it, particularly a young engineer, because you will learn a lot more than what you would in an office in some scenarios. So tell me, it was a few months ago, you sent me a LinkedIn DM, and I obviously was surprised. You put yourself out there. Your message was considered. It had a summary, and you obviously pitched to come on the podcast, which I greatly appreciate, and I'll obviously put that out to anyone that feels like they have something to offer. Why did you do that?
Because I feel like a lot of other industries have their own element of glamour, and there's something everyone believes to be very interesting about. If you're a doctor, you're saving lives. If you're a lawyer, you're working on these high profile cases. If you're really a Sparky or a Chippy, you've got these amazing stories. However, from an engineer's point of view, we have, or it appears that we have one perception that the world sees us as. And then on the other hand, construction, what is it really? What does an engineer really do? So the reason why I pitched myself was that I wanted to have a conversation about the industry, about the how the industry looks through the eyes of someone very green, and why I personally find it so interesting. So
Yeah,
great. And again, sorry,
go for it.
you rarely see an engineer's podcast or a podcast based around engineering or construction, and that itself is, yeah, it's starting to happen now. This being one of them, and just being a part of something that almost feels like a new wave is it's interesting. And I've always been about having great stories. That I've always loved that. And that's what this industry facilitates. For example, like on Saturday in the rain, I was filling up potholes. That's a great story. And it's a lot of these great stories that no one knows about in the industry. So a lot of that was my main reason why, let's have this conversation. Let's see how it would go.
Yeah, I mean, I talk about it a lot, not just perception of what an engineer does. A lot of time you're at a barbecue and people say, "Oh, what are you doing?" You say you're an engineer, and they go, "Oh," and then they want to talk about something else. I don't think engineers are very good at putting themselves out there, at telling stories about telling how they saved that project millions of dollars, or humanitarian wise,
Mhm.
saved those people or something even in the developing world. So it is very interesting. What's your take on the perception of engineering, where from your lens?
Initially, I came in having the perception that the whole world has. This is what we've been taught. What does an engineer actually do? Do they crunch numbers? Are they like doing equations? What do they do? I did not know. And coming in, I had this idea, oh, they're a little bit shy, a little bit soft spoken. Outside of the work, they don't have a lot going on. And all that changed when I came into my first company, J. Wyndham Prince. And that's when I met all these people and I realized they've got so much to them. And it just adds to their profession. So a lot of it was very much of what you're saying. That was the perception I had. And then when I did go to another company, I realized there is so much more to it. What we do is actually so interesting.
Yeah. So was that a perception at university? Is that how, or was it pre-university? Like, was there a lead up to that moment? Because I really want to unpack that whole premise about perception, because even talking with undergraduates who haven't been in the workforce, they have a perception. And then sometimes, graduate in, say, a tier one consultancy might have a perception. How did that perception change over time? Was it through university and then into the workforce, and that was a moment? Or was it something maybe a bit more gradual as you gained more competence and sort of knowledge about engineering?
My perception changed as I got into the workforce and I started to get exposure to different types of things.
Mm.
That's when I realized that this industry that we are in has so many different faces to it. It's so varied and so interesting. Not only when you look at the financial side, but when you look at the type of problems we are told to solve. And the problems are from something so small as we have to install a drainage line, but we can only get so close to the surface. What are the alternatives we could use? Do we go a smaller pipe, or do we go for a culvert, which will allow us to get closer to the surface? Or on the other hand, it could be something along the lines of we have an untouched greenfield job. There's nothing there, untouched the way it just was. How are we going to turn this into what looks like a developed city? How does that happen?
Uh,
And I think as I got exposure to that, I realized, okay, right, there's a lot to this.
Yeah, there's a lot of detail in the detail. It's something, I think you never stop learning as an engineer. You're
Oh,
always
no, God, no.
looking to challenge. I just haven't met anyone else that's got, everything on lock. I've never met any engineer who's to be like, I know everything, because I don't think a brain could handle that sort of information.
Oh, man, I don't know what I don't know.
Exactly.
It's
Yeah.
one of those
Exactly.
things.
Yeah, that's really cool. Yeah, look, that whole perception piece, and I'm glad you mentioned it, because obviously that's the whole point of the podcast, is to share the stories, inspire young engineers, and change the perception of engineering, because it is a lot about sharing not just the horror stories, not just the success stories, but about the problems that have been solved. So, as a young engineer of 2 years, what's something that you're most proud of? What's something that you did that you feel like you're super proud of it, and why?
I can think of one. It was at my time with Jay Wyndham Prince, and at the time I was in the project management team. Me and my partner, or assigned partner at the time, we were assigned to undertake, I believe it was a multi-hundred drainage asset inspection in the Penrith region, covering Berkshire Park, Llandarlo, and Londonderry. Now, these assets involved inspection of culverts, inspection of pits, inspections of channels. And it got to the point as we got closer to the center of the town where we had established curb and gutter, really meaning there was established drainage there. We needed to find a way to inspect these pits. We were quoted $20,000 for someone to come in, lift the lid, take some photos, take some videos, and then send it to us. That's a lot of money considering the sum of the contract. So our team came up with this idea, it's like a ragtag idea where at the time I had an Apple Watch. So we got a selfie stick, we got my Apple Watch, and we got my phone, and then later on a company phone. And we stuck the phone to the selfie stick, and we put that inside the pits we needed to inspect. Because the requirements were, we needed to assess the condition. We needed to assess, is it blocked, is it not blocked? Does it need any maintenance? So we came up with this solution that effectively saved us, I believe it was 15 to 20 grand on the project. And the whole time we're putting it down the drain, and we're looking at it on my watch, and we're just thinking, all right, well, yep, take video of that, take a photo of that, snap like that. It was like something out of like a Brosnan Bond era film,
Yeah. Yeah.
And coming out of that, me and my partner was so bad because it was just so different.
Yeah.
And that really was what I felt like meant to be an engineer. You have a problem, you have a constraint. How do you handle it? And this is how we handled it. And the funny thing was, we were so gassed that, oh, this is a great idea. We're feeling ourselves. But we're using duct tape to stick the phone to the selfie stick. And then all of a sudden, one of the managers at the time, Mark Santoro, was like, well, why don't you just, tie some string around it instead of using duct tape?
Yeah. Right.
And it was like Mark II of our little gadget.
Yeah.
And it just got improved.
It was improved even more.
It was improved even more.
Yeah.
And I remember thinking I was so worried because we were using my phone at the time. I went up to my manager, Chris, I'm like, hey, if my phone falls down the drain, you guys gonna cover me, right? Certainly you would. And yeah, that was definitely one that was very out there that I'm quite proud of. And I think another, a little bit more in line of what we do is our Western Earth Moving, our current company. We needed to organize the precast pits. They needed to be casted. We wanted to get that locked out before Christmas. So a lot of it came down to, well, what do we need? Who do we need? Why do we need it? When do we need it? So it's coming up with that program. And as part of that program, it also included investigating, well, what has been done on site, what needs to be done, Now, when can we book it in? When can we plan it? It was almost that planning element that I also found very enjoyable. Now, the big thing is, you know, you, it's like Mike Tyson said, everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. So we're just waiting to see what happens, see if
Yeah,
this plan works out or not. But I'd say, yeah, those are the two big things. Yeah, I
I
can think
really
of.
like that. So, yeah, I mean, the whole, the phone with the selfie stick and coming up with ideas like that,
Yeah,
and
I'm the brown
saving
MacGyver.
MacGyver. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
James Bond. Eat your heart out. Laser watch. I mean, I love it. So tell me though, because I always think about things like that, and you talked about those project savings, 15K, 20K, whatever it is. What's your take on engineers getting a cut, a commission, a part of the value that you brought to the project? What's your take on that as a young engineer?
My take is if anything gives me more money, I'll walk for it, mate. Absolutely. By all means. Till
Then
today,
on
yeah.
that, so then I sort of want to take that further because
Mm.
then I go, if you knew that you would get a commission or a margin on, would you be even more inclined, if not in your mindset, thinking, how can I continually save this project more money and time?
Oh, absolutely. It incentivizes you to really drive for it, push it forward. And if we view engineers through the lens of these are people you need to be problem solvers, also need to be out of the box thinkers, you're now encouraging that habit. You're now encouraging that form of thinking that you want. So now all of a sudden, you've got people putting in the time where they're actually working. Well, what can I do? What else can I do? How can I save the project money? Why? Because now I'm getting a piece of the pie. So
Yeah.
yeah, it could work. I don't know. I don't know if it's been done anywhere else in the industry. What would you say? What's your take on that?
Oh, it's definitely done. Oh yeah, big time. Not a lot in Australia, but definitely overseas.
Oh, I
Um,
don't know.
and they have to be quantifiable savings, usually by contract or mechanism.
Mm,
There needs to be a value mechanism. It's almost like even like a drainage, like a pre and post development, or even, you can talk about, say, evaluation for a property done, prior to or post, development application approval. I just find that a lot of people will do something like that and then never capitalize, on the savings or be incentivized by providing that additional value. So I wanted to ask that because
mm,
I would hope that that's something that our industry can embrace in the future, moving towards incentivization, because in my mind, that will drive innovation a lot more than, you know, the status quo.
absolutely. I mean, really, what is innovation is letting your creativity wild in a box of constraints. That's really what it is.
Yeah.
And so I suppose then is how would an engineer, young, old, either, or, how would they present this to capitalize on it?
Yeah. Well, that's a good question because you look at it and, for you in that scenario, it could have been as easy as just asking the question. Could have been as easy as when you went to, say, if you had one performance review time. Or alternatively, I know as a young engineer, I'd come up with a solution and run a project, and I knew that it made significant profit for the company. And I just nonchalantly, in passing, mentioned that to the CFO of the company, and then said, "Well, it's sort of salary review time coming up."
API.
And the stars aligned. And yes, I did get rewarded, which was, it was outside of what the performance review was. It wasn't a particular KPI, but I think that's where you've got to find those moments. You need to know who the people are. You need to know where the influence is. Sometimes you need to know
Mm,
the decision maker, which is very, very important. And I think it's about framing your value proposition. What was or is the value? Because a lot of time people say, "Oh, I could save you $2 million." You go, "Well, that's great, but I never actually spent it." And
Mm,
that's probably the hardest thing I think that you need to prove. It's the justification of the value. If you can say if it's quantifiable, it needs to be clearly quantitative. And then I think, you should be able to frame your value proposition to the right person that has the influence, the decision maker. And then, yeah, why not? Because the worst thing they can do is say no. But the best thing they can do is give you a piece of the pie, pay rise, promotion, who knows? Or maybe nothing. And then next time you might not even do anything and you might get a pat on the back you weren't expecting.
well, I suppose now that you mentioned this, it could also help to that goal you have about really changing the perception of engineers. If more engineers were to be forward and speak about the solutions they come up with, and I'm sure senior engineers constantly have all innovative ways to handle these things. It would almost be like, well, now it's like, look, take a look at the problems I'm solving and look at how I did it. And then now you've got that element of excitement because it's different, it's unique, it's interesting. It's almost like those medical TV shows where it's a new case every week. What is a new problem of the week? How do you go about doing it?
Yeah.
But then I suppose leading into that, what is one particular problem that you solved that you're quite proud of that was done quite differently? Or not, just something you look back on your career and you're like, that was a good one. That was one for the ages.
36% of listeners won't subscribe to this podcast, and that's a real shame. If you want to help me share the stories and help others learn and grow, then please like and subscribe. Yeah, that's a good question. There's a few, and there's many. Um, for me, it's about just looking at problems differently. I think you need to have a greater understanding of the complexities of a particular thing before you can break it down into micro pieces, unpack it, and then find that one piece of the puzzle that will change everything. There's been a lot where I've, changed. I remember, changing all the road widths on a project and creating an extra $14 million worth of net saleable area. I've come up with storage solutions for sewer and saved, a $20 million ticket for an on-site wastewater treatment plant. I've written business cases for, developers that enable them could save over $400 million. I mean, there's so many to go off. I think if you can come up with a better outcome in both, time, money, and cost. No, I said that wrong. Quality, time, and cost. If you can improve the quality of something, if you can benefit the human environment, if you can benefit humans or the place or the
Mm.
space that you're creating, if you can do something quicker, or you can save costs along the way, I think you'll find value in most things that you do. Um, for me, that is the key part of what an engineer really needs to bring. A lot of the time, I just see a lot of like, oh, here's the design. No one really talks about why the
Mm.
design is like it is. It's just usually like that's why it is because it is. And I always like to challenge the design, the thinking, and looking at a problem in a different way. Sometimes it is what it is. A road has to be how it is, or a drainage line has to be how it is. But sometimes if you can zoom out and look at the bigger picture, sometimes you might find the value you're after.
So on that, Darren, and this is something I'm actually very curious about. How do you encourage that type of thinking? I understand for some people it may be innate to have this out of the box thinking, approaching problems like this. But what can a young engineer do to sort of get into that frame of mind where you're looking for opportunities where you're looking to get that out of the box idea, whether it be in the shower or wherever, like, how do you do it? How does one get into that mindset?
Yeah, so I think it comes from curiosity. I think as a young engineer, it's very important to be curious, not just about what you have, what you find, what you know, You need to be curious about everything. I was speaking the other day in a lecture theatre, and I sort of pointed to one of the columns and said, "Oh, what grade's that concrete? How much reinforcement is in there? What's the diameter of the bars? How many are there? Is it circular? Is it oval? Is it square? This slab, how did they polish it? How did they get that class finish? The glass on the wall. When are we going to get computer screens in the glass? That we don't need TVs anymore. It can just be done by glass." You can see people like, oh, and like, this is just things that my brain will just think about because I'm just naturally curious. I've always been curious about things. And I think that's got to have to be the start. The other thing,
Mm.
as I mentioned, is you need to be curious about things that have nothing to do with what you know about, whether or not it's water, gas, roads, bridges. Yes, within engineering, but also within tech, also with innovation, also within, and maybe, we can talk about architecture, how things were done, how things were built, how, viaducts were built, how, aqueducts were built, how old reservoirs were built, how, structural formations, why is a brick the shape and size it is? It could just keep going and going and going. And I think the more that you are curious about the things that you don't know about, I think a lot of the time, the more these things cross pollinate into other areas where you never thought that they would. Um,
It's a-
I think too, you've got to have a goal in mind. I think it's really important to understand what the goal is. You know, a lot of the time it is time, cost, and quality. That is true. But sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's about saving a big tree, from a drainage alignment, or, a creek that you want to try and remain in situ that you don't have to realign if you don't need to, if you can get the flood modeling right, for example. So I think if you can find those levers and what those then goals are, once you start marrying those up, the other thing too, and I think this is something a lot of engineers miss out on, it's about understanding what the standard really is saying, or the code, or the guideline, or the DCP, or the approval, the authority. What does the authority want? What do their guidelines say? And then how can you use those guidelines to get the best out of the situation you have? I think a lot of the time engineers miss out on that. I think the industry you're in, property development and construction, you need to understand, what does the client want? What can I do from a council perspective? What can I do from an authority's perspective? What do all those standards and codes mean? How do I overlay all those on a problem and maybe use one of those as the solution? And I think a lot of people get confused about engineer, project manager, or project managers should do that. It's the engineer's responsibility to understand all of that. And I think the more you can be curious, understand the greater landscape of not just design intent, but the approvals, what the authorities need and want, what a client wants, what are their drivers. Once you mix all that together, I think that's when you can really provide true value.
So it all stems from the seed is curiosity. If you just
Yeah,
be
I think
curious about your
so.
industry, it will sprout into then addressing the needs of the person, the needs of the standard, the needs of your company, of the project, the money. That's where it
Yeah.
all starts from.
Look, I believe so. I think too, and I talk a lot about, and I was going to actually ask you, what is what does a niche mean to you? Like if I said to you, what's your niche? What's your response?
I always thought a niche was sort of like it was a smaller area of work. It more so in the sense of not quite sure how to word this. I suppose it's like that little corner of something bigger. If you have the construction industry being the umbrella, being the house, a niche could refer to the little details of it and having a concentration on those little details.
Yeah,
So you have the house, and you could be like, all right, my niche is, it could be fittings,
sure.
could be drainage. We tend to come
Yeah.
back to drainage a lot. It could be
Well,
structures.
yeah.
That's sort of
So
what I imagine it to be.
so out of where you are now, how do you think that you have a focus of, you don't have to know everything, but you feel like you have a niche just yet? Or if you don't, what would you like it to be?
It seems like I almost fell into my niche when we speak of civil engineering. I fell into civil works, mainly around land development.
Yeah,
I suppose
good.
that would be my niche. And because it, by chance, I fell into it with J. Wyndham Prince and then Western Earth movie. And it just so happened that I've also enjoyed it as well. And it gives me a bit of everything.
Yeah. So where I'm going with this is that I think that's the other piece of the puzzle, and I do talk a lot about with young engineers. It's about trying to find your niche. And by that, I mean really into the detail of something. Say you mentioned drainage, right?
Mm.
So for me, drainage, if you ask me, I'll be like, okay, so from pipe types, RCP, culverts, different types of culverts, you got FRC, then you start, those are just pipes, right? And then you start talking about the trench. What does the trench look like? What's the embedment? What's the backfill? What does that look like? What are the widths? What's the horn? What's
Mm.
the underlay? What's the overlay? And that's just in trench design, which is done with a different calculation. And then you start talking about sizing. So from the 5 year, the 10 year, you got the 1% AEP or the 1 in 100 year, how that operates. Then you've got pits. You talked about cast in situ. You've got precast, and you've got special pits. And then you've got junction pits. Then you've got different lid types. You start talking to the lids, and then the structural design of some of those big pits and what that looks like, what the reinforcement looks like, the concrete grade. Is it 40 MPa, 25 MPa? What are you going to use? What do the bar shapes look like? Are they top and bottoms, each way, each face? Like you got rocker pipes, then you got differential settlement. What does that look like? I could just keep talking about this for
Mm.
an hour, just on the specifics that I know about that. Now, drainage isn't my niche. I know a lot about drainage, but water is my niche. And I've always been very proud of that. And I was very lucky early in my career to find that as my niche. And it's something that I just went, I want to know a lot about that. And I studied really hard. But if you ask me about pumps, concrete, corrosion of steel, I know a lot about corrosion, valves, valve fittings, sewer, I know a lot about wastewater. And I've always been known as the water guy. Everyone's like, oh, you
Mm.
know a lot about water. So I think that's the other thing I would say to young engineers is try and find that one thing that you can just dive as deep and as deep and as deep as you can. Because right down the bottom of that well, not using water as a pun, but right down the bottom of whatever it is that you're diving into, once you get down to the bottom, once you know all that, that's when you're really going to be able to provide the true value. Everyone can be a generalist, right? Everyone can know a lot about everything. And I think that's very important, no doubt. But I'll just find that one thing that you like and I just go hard at it. And it comes back to that curiosity.
Well, considering that, I have a feeling it might be, or I might lean a little bit more towards general grading, earth moving.
Yep.
Um, Mainly because I find the machinery we use just so cool and
So
amazing.
cool. Yep.
I've been lucky to take a ride on a dumpy, and I believe it's a
Cool.
40-ton dump truck. I was in the
Yeah.
passenger seat, and I think because it all plays a role in moving earth,
Yeah.
and even got the diggers. So hey, but you know what? Look, still very green. That might be my niche. Maybe I'll fall into something else.
But
I
see,
suppose I
I
just
look
got to
at
keep
that,
trying.
right? So then I start going, right? So how much does it cost per cube per machine? What sort of material are you carting? Is it clay? Is it soft soils? Is there rock,
Shale, sandstone.
shale, sandstone? How can you rip that? Is it with a D10, D9? What are the ripping rates? What are the
Yeah.
productivity? Then you start talking about contract programs. How can you build those? What's the back end? What's the backing sheet look like towards building your program? There's so many layers to that. And that's just not even
Mm.
really talking about the machines themselves. How much petrol do they take? Who drives them? Where are the machines? Where are they made? What's the future of those machines? Is it lithium? Can they run on lithium? How do the posi tracks work? How do the GPS works? How do they get the levels right? How do they get the survey from the DTM model into the survey? How does that work?
Yeah.
Like there's just so much to unpack just in that. And if you go, that's what I know a lot about, man, just dive into that because what's going to happen is you will And then you'll get these little like offshoots and tangents. Then all of a sudden you'll start learning about geotech. Then you start learning how to read bore logs. And then you'll start looking at bore logs and you look at the strength and you look at things like rippability and rippability assessments. And you look at like a strength index. And then before you know it, you'll be like an expert on ground conditions. And then you might go look at a site and you'll go, oh, you're going to have to cut the crest on that hill. There's probably rock there because I did the site 3 doors down and there was rock there. It was this class and we had to use this excavator. We had to use this ripper. And then not only that, you might say, oh, if it's hard rock, I might need to use a saw. I might need to use a hammer. I might need a 30-ton excavator because it won't be able to rip it. And then you start unpacking all that. And all of a sudden, you've got a wealth of information that you'll go to the next site and talk about adding value. Client will turn around and be like, oh, this is what we're thinking. You'll be like, oh, show me your cut to fill plan. Oh, that's a $2 million problem right there. Why don't you move this over there? Because you can back it all up. And not only that, you can price it and you can do a program off the back of it. That's when you'll provide value.
Yeah, right. So as you peel back the layers, as you get a deep understanding of your niche, then you can start pivoting into the financials of it, the programming of it. How does that niche then relate to another niche? It's like a web. Get to the core of it and then start working, weaving your way out.
Yeah, because once you get down that rabbit hole, on the way, you're going to find these little offshoots. And then those offshoots, you're going to dive. It's like, it is, you're right. It's a massive web. And you'll find yourself constantly diving in and diving back out. And that's the beauty of engineering. And that's the beauty of, I always say, try and do that every week, every other day. Like, I think learning on the job is the best place to learn. A lot of people, they'll learn something, but they won't ask why. Why do you do that? Why is it like that? Why did you do this? Take the opportunities because you get paid, right? So a lot of people say, oh, I don't have time. It's late at night. I'm on the internet. I'm like, no, don't do it there. Do it on the job. Like, do it on the job and find the mentors and coaches that will be able to give you that information. And I think I wrote something the other day on file notes. Just start banging out the file notes because they're the things that will be able to give you the insights and the research into the topics that you want. And if you can turn around to someone like a manager and say, hey, I was researching this topic the other day and I heard they're coming out with a D15. I don't know, I just made that up, right? Now, I don't know if there is a D15. I'm not sure. There probably is. But say there is, right? And then you go, oh, and I heard it can rip this strength of rock. Oh, have you seen anything like that? Oh, and then all of a sudden they're telling you a story that might, enable a better connection and discussion about some engineering success that is worth sharing and getting a deeper understanding of.
Yeah, right.
I talk too much. Now, I was going to ask you about your niche, which I did. Kartik, what's next for you, man? Like, tell me about your career dreams, goals, aspirations. Like, what can you see in your future?
Trophy husband, really. That's oftentimes why I hang out around walks. So looking for just a sugar mama or something. I just really can't.
That's hilarious.
In all seriousness,
I'm talking about his engineering career, man.
Okay, now that you've specified where exactly, I think a lot of it is seriously. I don't know. I don't know if I'm going to head down more so the construction manager route or the project manager route. Perhaps stay more technical, or maybe spill over into estimation. Truth is, I haven't dabbled enough in all these fields to really know. However, I am leaning a little bit more towards possibly construction manager because I love just seeing the things get built. That's really what I'm about. But in terms of where I would like to see myself going, I would love to be in a position where I can see a lot of the stories we have about the industry. And a lot of that, what that looks like is just letting people know that this is the project we had. It could even be something like the renovations they did to the fish market recently.
Yeah.
This is what it was. This is what it is now. Or it could be like, we've got some historical architecture, historical buildings in Sydney. What is the history behind it? This one particular building is so eco-friendly. It's the most eco-friendly building we've got in Australia. What's the story behind it? Why
Yeah.
is it like that? What drove it to be like that? So I suppose part of where I see myself as an engineer is having the understanding of the industry to then speak about the industry and speak about the different stories of different projects and different people in the industry. And of
Yeah.
course, being more involved in the construction activities, getting a better understanding of, why do these machines work this way? Is it worthwhile for me to be ticketed to learn how to run a digger, a dozer, dump the pad foot? Because then that now gives me more empathy for the role of the people that do it, and I can now better navigate how to address that in my program. So it's really a two-part. A lot of it is like, I want to speak about how cool our industry is, but I also want to be actively involved in the construction of it. So that's sort of where I see myself going.
Yeah, no, I love that. You started talking about, say the fish markets, for example. It's funny because that project, as an example, you might research a lot about that project, and then you might see it on someone's phone, or you might mention it in passing to someone, and they've also got a passion about that project or a similar project or some design that they used to reclaim the foreshore, and how that
Mm,
looked and operated. And you're right, and I like the idea of getting ticketed. I'm not saying that's you have to do something like that, but I think
yeah.
that's a really solid idea. I mean, empathy can unlock relationships that you never could have before without it. And it comes back to that curiosity in that niche and finding the things that, can help you accelerate your understanding about not just, a small thing, but a big picture.
Mm,
And yeah, I can imagine you like, one day, driving around on the Moxie, like, yeah, this is awesome. I think that'd be fun. I actually believe that one day most of those machines will just be run or driven by computers. I
probably,
think
yeah.
people will just stand back at the end of a 100-hectare site and just watch it be built. Within to the minute of when
Mm,
there won't be any breaks. There'll be no smoke hose. The toolbox talk will probably be reprinted, and someone might just check it. I mean, who knows what that future's going to
it,
look like? Probably won't be mine, but it probably will be yours and your
uh,
generation of engineers. So
it could be like Armageddon, they get a ragtag team of operators to, save the world.
it could well
That
be.
would be
It could
very
well
cool.
be. And I can see that. I can see that driver in the excavator, going
Yeah,
for it. Yeah,
that's it. Yeah,
yeah.
no worries. Rolling up your own little cigarette while you're in the bad foot. No worries there.
That's it, mate. Yeah, I'm keen. I love a pad foot roller. I'm
It's
more
great,
of a
yeah.
pad foot than a pneumatic tire guy. I can say that.
Yeah, yeah. I was on one and I was convinced I was going to topple it. It's crazy trying to
Yeah,
operate one. No, there's so much nuance and effort and skill to it.
yeah,
It's ridiculous.
yeah. There really is. No respect to all the pad foot roller drivers out there.
And
Much
us
respect.
operators in general, like what
Oh
they
yeah,
do is, I don't know, the way they get the blade so accurate, how knowing how careful they have to be so they don't even hit a surface. Even though we
yeah.
have measures in place, there's still levels to it.
Yeah. Yeah, I remember I knew a guy when I was younger, and he was like a detailed um, demolition where
Mm,
they'd crane him and his excavator like up to the top of a building where he'd be like demoing inside certain beams, columns, and slabs as he's sort of working his way down the building. And basically, he could like accidentally move his boom or knock something out in the wrong place, and all of a sudden his excavator be falling through floors. Like that's that's like he used to get danger money for that thing. And I'm just like, every minute he was talking, I'm like, tell me more, tell me more. Like, I need to know. And he'd give me these stories in detail. I was like enthralled. Yeah, so yeah, definitely you're right. Much respect to the operators out there. Much respect. So,
mm,
Kartik, I've
yes.
very much enjoyed our conversation. I got a lot out of it. I feel like maybe I spoke a bit too much, but you asked me questions, so I had to answer them. And I very much appreciate you coming on the show. And I'm truly sure that there'll be plenty of young engineer out there that will be chomping at the bit to listen to this. And I hope that and sure that they've been inspired by you and your journey. And I very much look forward to seeing what happens. And yeah, I look forward to seeing your journey and your career as it unfolds. So thanks so much for coming on, mate. I really appreciate it.
Likewise, Darren, thank you for reading my DM, taking it forward, having me on your podcast. It was my first one. It was definitely an interesting experience, but it was a lovely conversation. Definitely got a lot out of it, and I think what I did take out's gonna be very helpful for as I continue my career. So I appreciate that. Thank you.
Anytime, mate. My pleasure. Thanks so much for listening. I really hope you enjoyed that podcast. Please like and subscribe. It helps us reach so many more aspiring engineering professionals and entrepreneurs. You can find us on LinkedIn, Spotify, and YouTube.